Hey everyone, this is Jason Huffman, Battle Hardened Games, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about gameplay for my game 1750 Britain versus France. I'm really excited to show you a walkthrough and how the game works, and we'll cover a few different things. We'll talk about game setup, we'll then go into the turn progression, and after that we'll talk a little bit about battles and specifically how battles work in the game. So anyway, yeah, let's get started. I'm really excited. So one of the first things you have to do is set up the board in 1750. There's 4 different areas. There's the Caribbean, North America, Africa, and Indian theaters. Those 4 theaters can be arranged in any of these 4 areas. They just have to be split into the 4 separate areas with the high seas in the middle. At the start of the game, you're going to have 30 colony cards. You'll shuffle that colony cards deck, and you'll place the first 4 colonies drawn into each respective theater. So the first 4 colonies that you draw that are Africa, the first 4 that are India, the first 4 that are Caribbean, and the first 4 that are North American are what get placed into each respective theater. All of the remaining colony cards that you do not place onto the table are set aside. Additional colonies can potentially come into play later via other cards, but this is the table to start the game. What you'll do is you'll roll against your opponent, and the person who rolls highest gets to decide whether they want to have the first player turn in the game, or whether they want to place the first control marker onto a colony to take control of that colony. So in our little hypothetical here, if France had decided to take control of the first colony, then they would put a control marker onto a colony, and then they also receive the export associated with that colony. So in this case, Ile-de-France or Isle-de-France is precious metals, and the players alternate until 3 colonies are selected to control the game, that they control at the start of the game. What will happen is you'll take those 3 exports. In Britain's case here, we've got ivory, silk, and spices, and we'll take them, place them on our side of the table, and for every 3 different exports you get, it's worth a gold later in terms of income. So you want to try to diversify your picks right at the start of the game. After the colonies are controlled, another thing that you have to do is develop your starting hand. You're going to have 2 starting cards that are always in your hand to start the game. One of them is that His Majesty is giving this matter his personal attention, and then on the British side, the influence of William Pitt is the second card. On the French side, it's Splendor of Versailles, that second card. They also have King Louis on that side, and on this side it's King George. You'll have those 2 starting cards. Then you'll also draw 3 random historic event cards. There's 60 historic event cards in the game, and these will be shuffled, and then you'll randomly pull 3 of those cards to give you a starting hand of 5 cards. And these 5 cards are not shown to the opponent. They go directly into your hand, and obviously they're going to know the 2 that you started with that are starting cards, but the other 3 they wouldn't know what you have. The remaining historic event cards are put into 2 different piles. There's 10 cards that go underneath this card, and what this card does is at the start of each player's turn they're going to draw a historic event card for free. So these are usually like one-shot abilities that you can play once per game, but you'll be entitled to receive 5 of them. You take 5 player turns in 1750, there's 10 turns total, and so you'll end up drawing 5 of these cards for free. The ones that aren't placed into that draw pile are placed into a purchase pile, and they're available for purchase each turn. You can only buy 1 historic event card for 1 gold, but it is an option that's available to you if you wish to spend your money on that. So we've got our exports on our side of the table from the colonies. We place 3 gold onto our treasury, and that's our wealth that's available to spend during the game. And we can get things started. So in terms of a player's turn, you're going to go through a sequence of steps, and the first thing, like I mentioned before, is that you would draw a historic event card for free. So if we had taken 10 cards, placed them under this draw pile, we'd be drawing one of these cards and adding it to our hand. Again, the opponent does not see that. After drawing our historic event card, we can take any leader actions or actions that take place at the colonies. So if you have normally a leader out at a colony, some of the colonies will say that you can take some kind of action. Like, for example, this one here, India, Bombay, says if you control with the leader at the start of your turn, on the roll of a 6, the opponent loses 1 gold. So if you had a leader there, you'd be able to do that at that time during your turn. After you've taken all actions that are appropriate at the colonies, you can attempt what's called a political objective. The political objectives are stated all on this political objectives mat, and basically there are just a number of different world leaders that you can try to bring into this war on your side. They all have a difficulty number associated with them. You have to roll a die, and if your die roll equals or exceeds that roll, you successfully achieve the political objective. So you can go for Sweden, Native American alliances, Portugal, Austria, the Netherlands, Spain, Prussia, and Russia. The benefits go up the higher on the track that you attempt, and the difficulty goes up as well. So, it's a calculated risk. You're always entitled to 1 die when you make your political objective attempt, and then you can also potentially try to boost that die roll. You can spend 1 gold to add a +1 to your die roll, or you can excuse me, you can spend +2 to increase your die roll by 2. And you have to make those decisions before you roll that die, so you can't roll the die, see that you were short by 1 or 2, and then pay that additional money to try to increase your score. You have to make those decisions beforehand. And similarly, if you had any historic event cards that increased your political objectives attempt roll, you would also have to play those cards before rolling. You can never play those historic event cards or boost with gold before rolling the die. If you successfully achieve any political objective, you always immediately resolve those results. Usually they give you additional exports that you take on your side of the table. Sometimes they give you military units, and those military units go out into play immediately. After the political objective attempts, you can make purchases. You use the gold in your treasury to make purchases. What things can you do? Well, the main thing you can do is purchase units out of what's called your battle deck. These are mini cards. There's different kinds of units. Units are cards that have a die on them and they roll dice in combat. A lot of units are leaders, and leaders will be marked with a sword icon. You can purchase any combination of these battle deck cards. Their gold cost is marked in the corner. So we could, for example, spend 3 gold to purchase James Wolfe. After you purchase a battle deck card, it ordinarily is going to go into your purchases field on your player mat. It'll stay there until later in this turn when the purchases are actually placed onto the table. German Mercenaries is a card that's an exception to that. When you buy that card, it can immediately go out into play. And another thing you can purchase is what I mentioned earlier, an additional historic event card by spending 1 gold to buy it. After your purchases, we go into movement. You have to execute all of your movement prior to fighting any battles. So let's talk about that for a minute. We'll say, for the sake of argument, that we had this card out here, Geoffrey Amherst, was already in play, and we're up to our movement phase, or our movement step. We can move a number of different ways. If you're in a given theater at a colony, you can move 1 space to your left or right. Any colonies bordering are considered adjacent and only 1 space away. So this Geoffrey Amherst card could go here, or it could go here. This would take over this French colony in this case. But another thing you can do is go to the high seas. All colonies are considered 1 space away from the high seas. Or if you're at the high seas, you're considered 1 space away from any colony. So there's a lot of flexibility if you're at the high seas to go wherever you want to go. Now let's say for a second that Geoffrey Amherst was here, and we had the Marquis de Montcalm occupying this French colony. If you move over here, What will happen then after all the movement is resolved and we go into the battles step is a battle will be fought at this colony. Whether you have opposing units at colonies or at the high seas, a battle always has to take place. So, how do battles take place in 1750? Battles take place primarily via units rolling dice against each other in what's called pairings. The player whose turn it is considered the attacker. The attacker sets up the pairings. The main thing that they have to do is, for every defending unit, you have to assign an attacking unit against them, if at all possible. So here there's a defending unit. We have to assign an attacking unit to that defending unit if we can. Geoffrey Amherst would have to be paired against Montcalm. Now, if there was two French units here, in this case we'll say there's these two leaders, you would pick which one to pair against. If you had two leaders here, for every defending unit you have to assign an attacking unit. So you would have to make a determination here. You'd have to decide, okay, do I want Amherst to be paired up against Dupleix, or do I want him to be paired against Montcalm? Or do I want Wolfe against Montcalm or Dupleix? We might think, okay, I want James Wolfe against Marquis de Montcalm and Geoffrey Amherst against Dupleix. They all have different bonuses, so we'd be making decisions based on how likely we think it is that we can successfully defeat that opponent. So here it's 2-on-2. We've created two pairings, and they all roll dice. All the dice are considered simultaneously rolled. And a lot of the time I'll just take dice and I'll put them right on the cards so that I have good clarity on who's rolling what, what each unit has scored. And then we just add them up. So in this case I had a 5 and James Wolfe is a +3. So his score is an 8. Geoffrey Amherst is a die +2. I rolled a 2, so he's a 4. Montcalm is a 3 with a +3 modifier, so he's a 6. And Dupleix is a +1. I've rolled a 2, so his score would be a 3. So you just look at each pairing. In this case, 8 was higher than 6, so Montcalm would be defeated in this pairing. And Amherst's 4 is higher than Dupleix's 3, so Dupleix would also be defeated. The units that are outscored are destroyed. If it's a non-leader unit, those things just go back into your battle deck where you can purchase them again in subsequent turns and play them again. If it's a leader card, however, those leaders are captured. So in this case, both Montcalm and Dupleix are leader cards. Again, that's indicated by the sword icon. So they would come over here to my prison, and they're placed in there where the main thing that they're doing is providing a tiebreaker at the end of the game. They also prevent the opponent from repurchasing those same leaders. So that's how a battle is fought. Now I'm going to give you one slightly more complicated example, okay? So we'll say Robert Clive is also here, and we'll just kind of back up, and we'll say it was 3 attackers against 2 defenders. What has to happen here is, again, you have to assign at least 1 unit for every defender. So you could say, okay, Wolfe is against Montcalm, Amherst is against Dupleix. Well, now this extra unit gets paired up however you see fit, okay? So the side with more units is going to make that decision where you can say, okay, I want Clive with Amherst in this pairing, or I want Clive with Wolfe in this pairing. So you got some discretion there. What that does for you is you don't add the scores together, but it gives you, more units participating in the battle such that it's more likely that one of your die rolls will exceed the opponent's die roll. Whatever individual die roll is highest will be the winner and result in the opponent in the opposing side having to lose a die. So in this case, if Montcalm had rolled a 2, if James Wolfe had been against him heads up and they tied, neither unit would be destroyed. No units are destroyed in ties. But because I sent Clive into this pairing, Clive scores a 7. A 7 is the highest score in this pairing, so Montcalm would be defeated and he would become a prisoner. There's one other thing that could happen here too, which is Montcalm, even though he was outnumbered, could have still been the high roller. He could have rolled a 5 plus 3 means he got an 8, so his 8 would be the highest score in this pairing. What happens in that situation is the side with more units decides which unit to lose. So in this case, normally the British player would lose Robert Clive because he's not quite as valuable a unit as James Wolfe. His bonus is not as big. So even though outnumbered, it is still possible for the French player to win in this case. So we'll back up here. We'll say that the British player had successfully defeated all French units in this location. They've gone to the prison. Anytime you're at a colony that was controlled by the opponent and you have units and they do not, you can take over that colony immediately. You would replace this French control marker with a British control marker, and now the associated export with that colony of precious metals would be removed from the French player's side of the table, and the British player would gain it. So they would lose 1 precious metals, it'd come over to my side and potentially be worth more income at the end of this turn. After battles have been resolved, we place any purchases that we had previously made. So, just for a hypothetical, we could say I had spent gold this past turn on Edward Boscawen and privateers cards. These would now enter play. In general, you're restricted to playing new units at either colonies where you have a control marker, or you can always play units at the high seas. So maybe I'll place my privateers out at the high seas, and this leader I'll place here at Fort William, Bengal. So we've placed our purchases, and now we get to collect our income. Every player is always entitled to get 3 gold at the end of their turn, no matter what. So it kind of keeps you in the fight, keeps you able to do something, even if you're starting to lose. And you also get 1 gold for every set of 3 different exports. In this case, I had a spices, silk, and ivory set of 3 different exports. So that would entitle me to 1 more gold. So instead of just 3 gold in my treasury, I would actually now have 4 gold in my treasury. So you're always trying to get that set of 3 additional exports in order to get more and more income coming in. So anyway, that's pretty much the game. I'd love to hear from you guys, love to get your feedback. I'm really excited about the game, excited about the Kickstarter, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully, if you're somebody who likes history, it'll be appealing to you. We've got all the monarchs of Europe from that era. We've got a lot of the famous leaders from the mid-1700s. All the colonies are either maps or paintings, of like a cityscape or the harbor of the colonies from that era. So I've tried to kind of keep it as historically accurate as possible. The historic event cards we didn't talk about a lot, but there's a lot of unique one-shot abilities in here where you can destroy units. You can, like disease would result in dice rolls being reduced for the opponent. Uprising in Europe can result in their political objective attempts being harmed. Pirate raid can harm them in terms of the amount of gold they have in their treasury. So there's all these different random things that can happen. So the game is kind of based upon a lot of your decision making with your battle deck selections, the amount of risk you take on with political objective attempts, and then some of those one-shot random kinds of things that can affect it with the historic events. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Love to hear back from you guys, and thanks for your time.